There we go. Now I should have sound. Sorry about that. Oh, well. Okay, so I'm just getting my set up here. Okay, should have sound now. And just gonna see if we can get this kind of close. I think the problem is that I have perspective off here. Let's see if this helps. Yeah. All right, we're gonna get it kind of close here. Okay, that'll be good enough. So let's take a clay tubes brush and just kind of rough in these things. Actually, I'm gonna turn this off real quick and get rid of some of the stuff that I did last time. Let's do this. We'll go in here and go to subdivision levels, and under draw, I'm going to turn on project on mesh. And then just kind of rough in the design here. And I'm just kind of putting a little marking here so I can keep track of what's going on. I'm also just doing one side and keeping symmetry on. So this side's probably not going to match the image, but that's okay. Just want to kind of get a rough idea of where the design is so I can just put in some of the details like these dots. So this design that I'm roughing in is really just kind of like landmarks, so I can keep myself oriented on where I am in this big blank canvas that is the elytra. So just want to keep it nice and rough for now. I'll worry about the detailing a little later. Okay, something like that. Turn off the floor. So we kind of have our little landmark there. And I'm going to go in here and bring back the reference. There we go. Now I can go in here and do a little bit more fine detailing. And again, I'm going to keep everything kind of super symmetrical for the moment. Later on, I'll add some asymmetry into it. And let's divide this again. Let's take a look. Kind of add an edge on the inside of the elytra. Let's see if we can find a side view here. Yeah, kind of have a thick edge right here. I have a very soft edge, so use SK cloth, and I lost my chat. This right here is interesting. So we have this little spiky thing. So I have the spiky thing. Let's see. Sorry for the technical terms. Here's our little spike. This corresponds with this right here. And it goes down. I have this sort of curving around, but it's really more of an edge, a hard edge that curls around like this. So what I'm going to do is start to draw that in. The other thing is, if we turn off solo for a moment, this kind of goes up and over like that, and I have kind of a straight line. So what I might do is, let's do this. Let's draw that in, and then I'll just chip away from the underside, I think. So we're going to get something like, zoom in on this little spike right here. It seems to go right up almost like underneath it. Of course, that spike is a lot sharper on the actual image. That. Do is let's just get like maybe clay buildup, but I'm going to lower the Z intensity and just start digging away right here, kind of close to that edge. Could always retopologize this later and make it more of a flat surface, but I think right now I'm going to keep it as a surface with volume until I decide to change that. So right now I'm just going to kind of dig in here and worry about getting the shape more or less correct. Get the Z intensity up a little bit more than that. What software do I use for CT scans? In the past, I've had scientists send it to me as OBJ or FBX exported, and then there is some software that I've used, and I cannot remember the name of it right now. It's kind of obscure that I use every once in a while to kind of export as FBX or OBJ. They're always kind of like yeah, I mean, the German scientist that I'm working with right now has his own software that he's using, and he exports as an OBJ, but it's proprietary software. I don't know if that helps. That probably doesn't help at all. I'll look it up and when I get a chance, and let you know what it is. I forget the name of it. There's Drishti. I've used that before. Let me see. Yeah. That sort of works. Yeah, Drishti is something you can give it a try. Yeah, I found Drishti to be kind of not super easy to use and kind of a pain. They all seem to be, because they're kind of like, you know, proprietary and kind of slapped together. But I know that, you know, hopefully they're improving that kind of stuff. Let's see real quick. So I'm giving a lecture later this month online workshop. Of course, it's going to be in the middle of the night for anybody that's not in Europe. I really don't want to edit that image in Designer. Thank you very much. I really wanted to just open Windows. Thank you. Online workshop, and Thomas Vandekamp has his own proprietary software that he's working on for dealing with scan data. So I'll have to find out what that's called, and if it's available to the public. Hold on a second. Sorry, I'm trying to find a good link to his actual software. He's got a lot of publications in science. But this is Thomas Vanderkamp. He's a scientist I've been working for that's been doing some of the scans of flies and stuff. And he does really interesting, cool software. So he's been sending me the actual scans. So you can take a look at him. Let's see if this is actually, yeah, it's worth checking out. The thing about that workshop that I'm doing later this month is I'm going to have to try and do all this stuff in Blender because the scientists don't really have access to ZBrush, so that's not going to be fun for me. I'd much rather do it in ZBrush. Let's see, I'm going to do that edge, and we'll come back to it a little bit later. I'm just going to smooth it out a little bit. Let's refine this a little bit. I'm going to subdivide. I think that I don't know at the moment if I'm going to actually do the wings underneath the elytra. I'm going to see how far this one gets, but you know, maybe a little bit later on. I want to. If I do that, of course, I'm going to separate the elytra so that they're two separate pieces of geometry with not as much thickness to them, so that they can actually fold. I might do that. It depends on how good I can find the reference for the wings underneath the on the elytra. I mean, I do have a specimen of this thing, but you know, in order to, I'd have to dissect it, which I'm not quite ready to do yet because that would kind of destroy the specimen. But maybe if I get this and it looks good and I'm happy with it, I might give that a try and add the wings, because I think that'd be a lot of fun to do and to rig. You know. A nice challenge, of course. Actually, the one that I use for this is not mounted at all. It's kind of free floating. But it is, you know, posed nicely. I could always get a second one, or, you know. Sometimes with some of these insects, I'll buy 2 or 3 so I can take them apart, especially the little beetles. I have a little giraffe beetle that I've been meaning to model, and I bought like 10 of them just so I can, you know, take them apart because they're really cheap, you know, dead bugs and all. Okay, so let's see. Trying to think about how I want to do this texture here. Most of this is hair, so I think what I might do is I mentioned last time, it's like, if I take a close look at this, it's like, okay, so this right here is going to be this right here. So I'm going to start to kind of play with these little circular things. Looks like there's like, and again, I'll change the symmetry later on, but go here for the draw menu, and it's very, very blurry. So let's do this. Let's go back a little bit. I'm just going to mark where these are. Little circles. I think I had a little. Yes, this is right here. I was looking at this, which is up here. So it's kind of easy to get confused when you get zoomed in, but I think I got it now. Okay, so that's this right here. This is the same image. going to kind of these three right here. Obviously, it doesn't have to be totally exact match because it's, you know, probably going to be different for each beetle. I got to find out what these things are because they're really wild looking. Just going to make little circles here. Yeah, I'm kind of just experimenting. Obviously, I'm going to have to kind of repeat this kind of thing all over the elytra, but I want to kind of do a little bit of R&D here on how this is actually going to work, because I'm kind of figuring out as I go. It's part of the fun of it. Let me see if I can find something that's a little bit clearer to show how this actually works. The old inflate brush, and oh, you know, that's a really good question. The Adobe nonsense, because I've just started to clue into this like this week. So for those of you who may not have heard, Adobe made this weird change in their licensing, terms and conditions, whatever you call it, legal crap. It basically says while you're working in Adobe products, whether Photoshop or other ones, the computer could just take a look at what Adobe can take a look at what you're doing and use whatever you're working on at the time as part of their AI training, so they can train their artificial intelligence based on your artwork that you're working on without your knowledge. You don't see it happening, it happens behind the scene. It's really scary and weird, and I don't know how to react to it because, you know, I'm trying to keep an open mind about the AI thing as much as possible, but that's just plain evil. And what I don't understand, you know, is how legally they can get away with it, because I'm doing this right now as a personal project for you guys and for me, but you know, for my job, of course, I work with clients. I work with clients like Disney and other entities. You know, I worked on Aquaman. That's DC. I worked on a lot of, you know, and I work on this stuff in my own home studio. So how is it that if I'm working in Photoshop, I open something, picture of Aquaman or a design like that or something like that, how can they legally be looking at something that is so highly protected? Because, you know, whenever I've worked on a movie film project for a big studio, you would not believe the amount of security. I mean, if only the US government had the amount of security that somebody like Disney has, we'd be in much better shape. You know, it's insane. I mean, when I worked at Bad Robot, you couldn't take anything off the computer ever. If we wanted to put something on a USB drive, you had to fill out all kinds of forms. Someone had to come, put the USB drive in for you, then you would copy the file, then you would take it out. Really highly secure stuff. And even when I worked in small studios, you had to like sign in and sign. I mean, it's just unbelievable security. So if they set up all this security so that I can't, you know, take something home or share it online and all that kind of stuff, how is it Adobe can just look at whatever I'm working on and use that to train their AI? It seems like it would violate any number of other companies' trademarks. So I don't know how they're going to work that out. Maybe it's something they just put in the terms and condition now to see what would happen, but obviously there's a massive backlash online, as there should be, and a lot of artists are really upset about this, because artists who are working hard to keep their stuff away from AI, now if they're using Adobe products, they got no choice, right? Unless they just don't use Adobe products anymore. You know, what is Adobe getting back at us for pirating their software for so many years? I don't pirate their software, by the way. So I don't know what to think about it. I don't know what to make of it. You know, obviously you want to learn Adobe if you're a student, because you're gonna have to use it in class and everything, and for clients. But at the same time, this is where using alternative software makes a lot of sense. You know, I don't know. What do you guys think? This is something that's so new that I haven't had a chance to wrap my mind around it, and I'm going to talk with some of my friends this evening, actually, and see what their take is on it. You know, I'm sure somebody out there is going to be like, "Oh, it's no big deal. It's whatever, standard, blah blah blah." But it's like, come on, man, this is insane. Well, it seems like weird that they would have a copy of your work that they could sell without your knowledge. That seems to be fraught with all kinds of legal problems. I mean, I don't think even the Chinese do that, you know, and they don't really respect intellectual property at all. Um, but I haven't read the terms and conditions, so I don't know. You might be right on that. That's it's just it's annoying. It's a brave, annoying world that we live in now for artists. So I'm kind of like making these little lumpities here. You can sort of see them, you know, and you know it's kind of difficult. Like I don't know exactly what these red blobs are, so this is I'm just channeling a creature design kind of thing and kind of imitating what I see here without much knowledge, anatomical knowledge of what it is. I have to actually find like, because it looks like we have kind of like this kind of pattern in between these sort of staggered blobs, red blobs. Right now I'm just using the inflate brush to kind of get that detail in there. And the other parts, of course, are going to be covered with hair. I might go back and redo some of this stuff later, but right now I just want to kind of figure out how it's going to work. Also because it's cool, and it looks cool, and it's fun. That's the main reason. I think inflate is working against me here. Let's do this instead. That's a little bit better, using clay tubes. Things like inflate and pinch, they're cool brushes, but sometimes they can work against you. So I'm going to switch back to clay tubes here. Right now I have this up to 7.2 million points, and it should be fine. I mean, you know, the temptation is get in here and do this kind of molecular-like detailing, but I don't need to subdivide this up to, you know, a bajillion points, because in the end of the day, if we're looking at it from right here, that's already looks super detailed from that point of view, and I could always add that in with texturing later. So I might be overdoing it here. I don't know. We'll see. And it's always easy to knock it back if it is a little bit overdone. It's almost like they're kidney bean shaped in a way. I mean, if there's any Beetle experts out here that know what this detail is, let me know. If it has any purpose other than being kind of decorative. Let's switch back to inflate a little bit. Take a swig of beer. Apologies once again to Layla for accidentally using her titles on my video. My login wasn't working, so I wasn't able to change the title in time. But just as a reminder, this is Eric Keller. We're doing insect-inspired creature design. If you're just tuning in or watching this, for some reason my login was not working, so I apologize. I don't know why Adobe would need to actually look at our artwork that we're working on. I mean, don't they have enough images online to train their stupid AI with already? I mean, there are like a bajillion images online of everything you can possibly think of. So why do they need to mine even more? I mean, I guess, you know, if you're using like the Adobe generative AI stuff, it's generally drawing, from what I understand, it's drawing on their own stock images, right? Adobe stock, which is, you know, so in order to use it, you have to have like a full Adobe subscription, so you have access to the stock or whatever. So they were kind of careful about that, which I thought, well, that's a kind of a good idea. That way, you know, you're not stealing from artists, you're just using Adobe stock and then in another way within Photoshop. But I guess they decided they didn't have enough and they want to compete with other AI models, and so now they want to take our stuff while we work on it. And it's really freaking lame. Yeah, well, so for those of you who don't see the chat, Marcelo is saying, I have no love for companies that buy off competitors to slow down or kill their development or start charging subscriptions all of a sudden, owning the art that you made with it. It's beyond nonsense. Yeah, that's like Apple in a nutshell. That's why I switched. I mean, not that Windows is great, but I used to be a big Apple fan. And then I just saw how Apple was turning against artists the way that it bought out Shake, and then because I knew people who were Shake artists back in the day. That's how they made their living. Apple bought Shake and then killed it, and it's like left these guys. You know, they had to relearn like Nuke in a hurry and that kind of stuff. And it's the same with a lot of the Adobe stuff. The way they dealt with Final Cut was really horrible. And I'm sorry, I meant to say Apple, not Adobe. You know, Apple did a lot of things where, you know, because Apple started way back in the 80s and 90s as being the artist's computer, and they were supporting creatives. That was whole Steve Jobs thing. And then gradually over time, they just started just abusing that relationship to the point where I was just like, I don't trust Apple anymore. I don't trust that they have our backs, and I think that they're mostly interested in making money off of iPhone cases and that kind of stuff, and changing cords. And then you have people like Adobe that are like, yeah, suddenly charging subscriptions and, abusing the relationship with artists. So how much money do you guys need? Seriously. It's really a shame. It is like we're living in a digital gilded age these days. All the power is in the hands of the money, people rich enough to buy it. While we walk the streets, too chicken to even try it. And everybody's doing just what they're told to, because nobody wants to go to jail. Free brownie for anybody who can name the song that I just quoted. I'm losing my way. I want to make sure I'm not losing my way. Let's get in here and yeah, I mean the evolution of Blender is really interesting. When I was in the industry, of course, I was a Maya artist in terms of 3D, and it was Maya was the industry standard for the longest time. It still kind of is in terms of 3D, but it's fading fast, and Blender is taking over. I think ZBrush is still going to be the digital sculpting go-to for a while, for a long time, I hope, because I love it. It's definitely much more powerful than Blender, but you're right in that Blender is much more affordable and accessible. Now, of course, you have everybody out there has learned Blender. I'm still learning it now, which means that now, when I was starting out, if a studio was looking for artists, they would look for artists who knew the software. They would use the software that artists knew, right? So that meant Maya most of the time, to a lesser extent 3D Studio Max back in the old days, and stuff like that, Cinema 4D or whatever. So now that there are so many people out there that know Blender, it makes more sense for a studio to start using Blender. And now Blender's been around for a while, but it's only been viable as a production tool for the past few years. It was still, and it's still not, in some areas, not quite as powerful. The other problem is from what I understand, to get a lot of functionality out of Blender, you got to buy a lot of plugins that are written by, people that come and go, and that can cause problems if you're a studio, right? If you're a studio, you have an IT department, you have a network that needs to be maintained, and you can't necessarily go out and buy every single plugin. The other interesting thing that's going on with the industry is now I work out of my own home studio, right? So I have the software that I need, so I charge more because the studios are not having to pay the software licenses I do, right? So in that case, I can use whatever software makes the most sense. I still work with a lot of other artists who use Maya, Cinema 4D, and so on. So in that respect, I have to continue using Maya, but I'm starting to work Blender into my workflow. And of course, the other big one is Unreal. I think Unreal is going to even take over even more than anything else because of the real-time rendering. So I think the shift is happening right now towards Blender and towards Unreal as being industry standards. So it doesn't hurt to know them. Like I say, I mean, I've been using Maya since 1998, so I know it very well. Blender I'm still kind of fumbling around with, but 3D is 3D at the end of the day. The only thing that's truly alien is like Houdini. Even Houdini for a while, I mean, I used Maya for dynamics for the longest time because Houdini was just impossible to learn. There was not that much training material on it. I'm talking about in the days of like Houdini 8, so a long time ago. And then Houdini finally got their act together and started actually publishing decent training, and they put out free versions, and we got very aggressive in marketing. They finally got enough artists out there that Houdini is now the industry standard for doing effects, things like explosions and fluids and that kind of stuff. But who knows if but before that, I actually did a lot of dynamic stuff in Maya. I have a lot of stuff in my dynamics brain that I don't use anymore, because these days I do more modeling and texturing and animation than effects stuff, because I need to learn Houdini. It's been a while since somebody actually paid me to do any kind of significant particle work in Maya. What is meant by satin finish in jewelry, and how can I apply that on a pendant? You know what? I would actually ask that question to Tomas Wittelsbach. He also does a live stream, and he's much more knowledgeable about that kind of stuff. Like, I know the jewelry stuff from ZBrush all the way to the 3D printing. When it comes to the actual casting and the metals and that kind of stuff, that's Tomas Wittelsbach. I would definitely check him out and see if he has a better answer to that question, because I'm just going to give you an educated guess. It's your favorite method of learning a new software. I still like the Gnomon Workshop the best, because I think it's the tutorials are really high quality and they're complete. There's a lot of good stuff on Udemy. I'll watch YouTube videos, but they vary in quality, and I've recorded hundreds of tutorials, and so I tend to get a little bit snobby if somebody's doing a tutorial on YouTube and it annoys me. I have a hard time watching it, because I don't like it when they do sloppy teaching and that kind of stuff. I lose patience if I have to hunt around for buttons, or if somebody doesn't really explain something, like where the buttons are. That can be really frustrating. So my favorite way is probably the Gnomon Workshop. And of course I'm biased because I have a lot of videos in the Gnomon Workshop. That's my favorite way. I don't really do books anymore, because I've written books. I wrote books on ZBrush, I wrote books on Maya. But the last thing I want to do is sit there, look at a page, and then do this, and then look at a page and do this. That gets really tedious. So video tends to be the best, but also just experimenting and noodling around with it. And discovering things and talking to friends who know it. A lot, some software like Unreal comes with a lot of really great training, built right into it. They did a good job of really building some good training material that's within the documentation. I really like it when a company does good training inside the documentation. I think Autodesk is not great at that. Their training videos are, kind of spotty, and their documentation is really a pain to get through, because it's like stuff is scattered all over the place. I worked on documentation for Octane when I was at Otoy, and I actually worked on the ZBrush documentation way back in the day. So I did a lot of writing on that kind of stuff. That's a great way to learn software. Another great way, of course, is to take a class if you can, whether it's an online class or an in-person class. I took a lot of classes at the Gnomon School in Hollywood. I learned Nuke that way from Martin Hall. That was a really great way to learn Nuke. In fact, a lot of the ways that I learned ZBrush was from Madeline Spencer, back when she taught at the Gnomon School a billion years ago. And that's always nice, because you can ask questions, and it's nice to be there in a classroom full of people. I like the classroom environment. But those are expensive and not always accessible. Online classes are pretty good. The other great way to learn software is, once you're feeling competent enough and you get to know the people who make the software, is do beta testing. Beta testing is the way that I've done beta testing for ZBrush many, many times. And that's one of the best ways, because then you're getting it straight from the horse's mouth. Having Ofer teach you ZBrush, nothing really compares to that, or Paul Gabry, Joseph Drust, Ian, all those guys teaching you ZBrush, Louis Tucci. Of course, Louis Tucci was my student, so but I still learn stuff from him. as well. But those are all great. It's great to work with teachers who actually work with the software every day because they're at the company. And beta, so if you can get into the beta testing, that's always good. And usually a lot of beta testing you can kind of apply to those programs and stuff. Can I send you a link? What I would say is look at the ZBrush, like you're watching the ZBrush live stream right now. Look at the ZBrush live stream schedule and look for when Tomas Wittelsbach is doing his next live stream. Because what he does is you can upload a model and he'll do a critique, but you can also ask him questions. So he's doing the ZBrush live stream just on here. So you can go to the Pixelogic website, look up click on the link for the live stream, or here on YouTube, and then see when the calendar is and see when the schedule is. Yeah, that's a really good point for why companies don't use it. If something breaks and you can't get support quickly, that could be a real pain, especially if you're in production. But you know, Blender is also fairly new. I mean, back in 2018, when I was working on the planetarium show, they were just starting to, you know, Blender was just starting to be taken seriously in production. Before that, it was never taken seriously. So it's still fairly new. So they pay lots of money to make specific tools for specific companies in Maya. That's an interesting question. Point. Yeah, I mean they do make it hard to change the software. I mean, I think probably Adobe's the expert at that, right? Yeah, Tomas will definitely help you with the satin finish. You know, it sounds like, you know, kind of a brushed kind of technique, anisotropic specularity in CG terms, you know. Okay, I think I've tortured that one. Let's work on this a little bit more down here. I'm really kind of just noodling here, but that's what makes it fun. The best software is the stuff you can just noodle around in, you know. And that's why I love ZBrush so much. Okay, so we're doing this right here. I'm going to go in here and just do the same thing again. And it's like way blurry, but it's not too bad. Okay, so do this. So I'm just making little marks here, so you can remember where to put these. What I do is let's clean this up a little bit. And I'm going to go in here and just this little kind of fuzzy wuzzy stuff right here. So let's do this. Let's save this. I'm going to create a quick mesh extraction brush just for fun to kind of dial in some of this this furry type stuff just as an alternating texture. So let's go over here and this off, and I'm going to go W, and get this up to, say, 6 million, and squish it. Could be a plane or a cube, doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to go in here and use, let's see. Let's use a good old Damien standard brush, just for old time's sake. I'm going to use a different alpha. Maybe one like this. Turn it to Z add. And I'm going to go in here and go under tablet pressure, turn off use global settings, go into the size and bring this way down. And I'm just going to kind of draw out a little. Let's get my reference back up here. Something like that. Let's give this a try, and then I'm going to store a history state and go in here to the extraction brush and bring up the draw size. I'm going to press G to go into extraction mode and then just see if we can capture some of that. Yeah, there we go. Got a little texture brush here. Not perfect, but it's okay. I'm going to go back a few steps and try one more time just to see if we can get rid of that seam, because that seems kind of gross. Let's see if I start right here. That's all right. Okay, so let's go back to our Beetle. And let me just do this. Whoops. Make it a little bit bigger. You know, I'll probably refine it a little bit, but it's kind of nice to have a little texture there. Just kind of keep me grounded as to where I am here on the elytra. You know, ideally I would want to use actual fur, whether it's Yeti fur or XGen or fiber mesh or whatever, but right now I think that's kind of cool. It's just kind of a fun way to use the extract brush too. You see 4 times 7 is what? 29, 28, right? 4 times, I remember math. So we'll get up to 29 million. This computer can handle it. And it looks a little bit better. That's kind of cool. Let's see. Let's save next. And then I'm going to save this brush because it seems kind of useful. We'll call this Beetle hair. Let's go over here and work on this little bit right here. Oops. So I'm working on this shape right here. That's what this is. So I'm going to use that extract brush. something like that. And then let's go here and play tubes again. No, let's try inflate. I'm losing too much of that. Zoom in again, just to remind me how this detail works. Let's see if we can find a better one. Oh yeah, that's good. Not a bad idea to rotate it though. There we go. Question is, kind of want to go in this direction. It's really just kind of a lumpiness that surrounds these little divots. It's like molten lava or something. It's, I mean, well, it's like frozen lava. And you know, the funny thing is, I guess at all these software companies like Adobe, the big ones and everything, you know, the conversations that they're having at the highest level have nothing to do with art. It's all, I'm sure, business speak and marketing and all that kind of stuff that none of us really care about or think about as artists, but is just like business speak. I mean, it's like, you know, it's a sad thing that the world of art is actually run by MBAs, not MFAs, you know, because we're artists. What the hell do we know about business, right? At least at that level, not much. And so I guess that there's a huge disconnect between the people who make the software and the people who use it. I mean, I've noticed on YouTube now Adobe is having sort of these faux tutorial ads where somebody will start going off on showing you some technique and on Adobe, and it's actually an ad. It's a little bit annoying, also irritating for those of us who spend a lot of time actually working on creating tutorials. I mean, I'm sure the artists who give in the tutorials for the ads are sincere, and they're probably happy enough to have the work and the exposure and everything, but at the same time, it's just, I don't know, it's irritating. I mean, my experience working at a software company or a company that makes software is that there's always a disconnect between the marketing, the programming people, and then the users. And it's kind of unfortunate. Really, the first thing that should be in any kind of, and this is what I liked about Pixelogic and Ofair and Paul and all the guys at Pixelogic, is that they always put the users first. Ofair's primary concern was the happiness of the users of ZBrush. And I think that's why it was such an amazing piece of software. You know, and that's why it was nice to have, you know, when we had beta meetings, it would be Ofair himself that would come in at the end and do the presentation on the new features, you know, while they were in development. And that's really cool, because you could ask him questions. He'd go off for like an hour as well. A lot of those beta test meetings would go on for 3-4 hours sometimes. But wow, did you learn a lot. But it was just, it's a huge difference when you use the product for a company who actually gives a crap about the users, and because the users are a really tight-knit community, you know. I mean, this whole live stream thing, this is something that, you know, ZBrush, Pixelogic, now Maxon, has been encouraging since the day one, you know. And I think it's a really cool feature of the software, you know, that you can have direct presentations every week, multiple times a week, by various different users who do different things in the software, you know. You know, Pixelogic's not the only company that does that, obviously, but they're very good at it. Trick here is making these lumps in between these sort of red orbs easily distinguishable by shape and not just by color, because I'm going to have to go in and poly paint them eventually, and I don't want this to turn into just a mess of lumps, so I'm trying to keep the different shapes kind of distinct, or the pattern distinct. It's sort of working. Escape cloth in here, refine this a little bit. helps. Yeah, that helps a little bit. Getting the move brush in here and kind of nudging these guys. You know, a brush I don't use enough of is the nudge brush. Let's bring up the old nudge brush. It's kind of like move, but not really. Yeah, I kind of like the way that works. With that kind of weird kind of drippiness that we see here. Then I'll go in here and use that Beetle hair. Just to zoom out for a second. That's looking kind of cool. It's going to take a while. I might move on to other parts of the Beetle and come back to this a little bit, just so it doesn't get too stale. One thing I'm not sure about is this. I think the direction should go the other way. Let's see. I'm going to inflate this a little bit. I'm going to smooth this back. These little knobbies. And do it kind of on the other side. So I think, you know, I was looking at the wrong side here, but if you look at the way this design works, let me see if we can find a good image of it here, clear. Well, it might just be a feature of the light, but it's almost like, you know, these blobs are kind of moving this way, away from center. See how these are kind of going, we have this kind of thing. It's almost like if this is a liquid, it would be like running down the side here. And I was doing that here, but on this one, they're kind of going towards the center. So I kind of want to change the direction there. I know I'm being really picky here. But I think that the consistency will make it look more interesting in the long run. So I'm going to go down a few steps here in subdivision and smooth that out a bit. Like I said, this is why I call it kind of this phase kind of R&D, because I'm kind of figuring how I'm going to make these details, because obviously they're going to be a big part of the rest of the model. So I want to kind of establish some rules to begin with that I can follow to make it look more intentional and not just random blobs. So get these blobs like that. Of course, this stuff is going to be so small on the final model, it's not going to be noticeable. Hopefully be somewhat noticeable. So I'm going to use the nudge brush. Actually, let's do this. Let's go back. And just paint a real quick mask over these things so it can kind of overlap them. Because I like how this kind of stuff kind of overlaps these little red balls, whatever they are. So I'll mask these guys real quick. Let's go back and This is why it's great to do kind of accurate insect models, because I never would have thought of this type of detail on my own, but this would be a really cool thing you can add to, you know, some kind of creature's skin, even if a non-insectoid creature can really benefit from this kind of interesting sort of pattern. And this is sort of what I, you know, when I'm talking about when you come up with detailing, they come up with some rules, some basic loose rules to follow as you create your detail, so that you have sort of consistent motifs throughout the surface. So in this case, I'm doing basically little craters with little red orbs in them, surrounded by this kind of molten, these kinds of knobs right here. These things have a directionality to them that are kind of going away from center. So there's some simple rules that, you know, as I refine this, I think it'll hopefully look more consistent and interesting as it pops through the fur. From far away, I think it looks pretty cool. Close up, it still needs some work, but it's kind of cool. You know, if I can get, you know, the final of the fur to kind of overlapping this and have it just sort of hinted at with a few random fur hairs like you see in this detail, I think that'd be really cool. And, you know, I don't usually go into this kind of fine detail this early on, but right now I just was kind of in the mood to do it. So I just kind of wanted to see what it looked like. So what I like I said, a few things, you know, this is perfectly symmetrical, so eventually I want to go in here and kind of change this up a little bit so it doesn't look like that super symmetrical. And then, you know, kind of bring some of these ideas into other parts of the model. You know, and I've just kind of blocked out the basic design here. Let's save next. Let's take a look at some of the other parts of the model. Yeah, it's going to look cool when it's finally done. Another thing I want to work on is the detail on the legs is really cool. This stuff. There's a lot to do in this model. I might bounce back and forth between some other models because I have some B models that I really need to finish. But I'll work on this for the next couple of sessions here. Get these a bit more spiky. These things are really wild. I mean, look at this detail. It's just kind of insane. This has its own rules to it. These are more discrete lumps, about the same size, almost in rows, but not quite in rows, right? And then you look at the other legs in the back, and they're not nearly as lumpy, but they also, let's take a look. You can see we have some hairs on here. We don't necessarily have these lumps or these lumps. Just a little bit here and there, but mostly fine fur. So you can see the surface here is rough, but it's nothing compared to how lumpy this leg is. It's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, you know, replicating a detail molecule by molecule, that's a little bit too much for me. I try and get the general idea and then go with it because it's going to vary from individual to individual. But here on the coxa we can see we don't nearly have as much lumpy, but we do have this matted fur. And then these kinds of things. There's also, you know, the direction or the current of the fur, the way that it's going is kind of interesting. And these bare spots. I mean, the bare spots could be the part of the fact that it's dead or it's old or whatever, but I would say wear and tear is probably the most likely cause. But you know, adding those little hints of specularity underneath fur is what makes it look really cool. Like this right here, this kind of part that's somewhat shiny emerging from the surrounding fur is really cool. Very realistic detail. And of course we also have the underside here, which I gotta get to as well. So, I mean, I'm kind of having some fun here with this detailing, but I might go and work on some of the other parts of the model that are a little bit further behind next. So maybe these legs, which are cool. And this actually might be worthwhile splitting up these front legs into subtools, since I really need to get a lot of detail out of them. So what I might do is, let's do this. Then Control Shift click on this. Get this out of the way. And on the solo button. Yeah, so I think what I'm going to do is make a subtool out of this. That way I can really subdivide it and get more detail out of it, because this is a super detailed part of the model. So I'll do split hidden. I'll go down here to split. I've got to go to the lowest subdivision level. Split hidden. That way the other parts of the leg don't lose their subdivision level. So, and then of course I can make a folder out of this. So let's make a new folder, and let's call this front legs. And I'll take this and put this in front legs, and this, put that in front legs. And let's turn off the solo button. That works. This is the femur, so we'll call this front femur. It's the coxa, but it's also the tibia as well, so I'll just leave it alone for the moment. And let's get this up to highest subdivision level. It is 827,000 points. Let's subdivide this and get it up to 13 million. Why not? All right, so with that, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it a night on this particular live stream, and we'll save this more work for next week. I want to apologize for having a rough start. As usual, kind of started in a hurry, and unfortunately I wasn't able to log in and change the title. So once again, apologies to Layla. This is not Layla, this is Eric Keller doing bugs, not character appeal, doing bug appeal. Hopefully that's not too confusing. And I will catch you guys next week. Have a good week, and thanks for listening to me ramble on about bugs once again.